All right, good afternoon. Welcome to our second session. And this one is on motivation and loyalty of the millennial workforce. So take a peek at this slide here. It's just got a little information on it. It says 91% of millennials stay in a job less than 3 years. Wow. That's significant considering that a lot of organizations are spending 80% of their training dollars within that first year. And so that's something to look at. Second one, 78% of millennials would rather spend money on an event over buying something. And that tells us about buying habits with that. And from a marketing perspective, that's huge to know. And we're going to get into this a little bit on experiential shopping and maybe what that means. Third one says 54% want to start their own business, or in some cases have already started one. And I can tell you the students that I teach at UCCS, a lot of them have side businesses. A bunch of them do, even if it's something just as simple as roofing or painting houses, they're doing that. 45% will choose workplace flexibility over pay. How much pay, that's an issue, but that's something to think about. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about. So earlier we talked about kind of getting to know the millennials. Now we're going to get into this idea of motivation and loyalty in terms of what's important. So here's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to focus on these areas. The big one, and especially in some of these industries, maybe the industry that you're in, is attracting millennial employees, getting them even to come and work in a certain industry. And we found some industries are really struggling to attract them, and they need them as the workforce is aging out. So that's an issue. Building loyalty is another factor, and millennials have been accused of not being loyal. I'm going to show you there is loyalty. It's just a little different, and it's a little more personal, and we'll dig into that quite a bit. And then after we've attracted them, we've built loyalty, we got to keep them. And we saw with that first statistic, 91% are leaving within the first 3 years. No other workplace generation has ever seen anything like that before. That's huge numbers, exponentially higher. So we got to do some things to do that, and my goal is again to give you some tools to do that. All right, so introduction again, and you guys have heard this before, but for the next group, my name's Scott Van Ness, and I'm an instructor of operations management at University of Colorado Springs. I caveat that because I'm not really what we call a core academic type. I come from industry, and at the university, I'm considered a professionally qualified instructor. We have a mix in the College of Business of people who are academically qualified, and they drive research. And then those of us who are professionally qualified, we come from the field. And my experience, as you can see up there, I've got over 25 years of experience in logistics and supply chain management. Most of that in the Air Force. I served 21 years and retired as a lieutenant colonel. I worked a lot in operations and supply chain. I spent about 5 years with Target Corporation in distribution operations and supply chain. I don't know anything about the retail end. I know about moving boxes, and Target moves a lot of stuff in that industry. It gets real interesting around Christmas time, and it's an interesting industry. I'm also a small business owner. My wife and I own a company called National Loan Clearinghouse, and we're a loan brokerage firm. And what we do is we work with small businesses that need money, and we have an array of private lenders that we line them up and work with. The banks are pretty restrictive on giving out loans right now, and some of the lanes are pretty tight in what banks will do. Private lenders will do a lot more, and if we're going to grow nationally, if our country's going to grow, it usually comes from small business. And so it's a good industry to help small companies grow and get the money they need to do things and create jobs. So that's kind of a quick background on me. Where I kind of started on this millennial issue is in my time when I was in the Air Force. In the military, it's a pretty structured environment in terms of jobs and skill sets and things that you do over your career. A certain rank, you do a certain thing, you do certain schooling, and you continue to move up. And when I was mentoring and counseling a young lieutenant who was working for me at the time, I was going over that career path. And the conversation went well, but towards the end of it, I asked him, well, what do you think? And he's like, I'm not doing that. Like, what do you mean you're not doing that? That's what we do. He says, yeah, I don't want to be you. I got a little offended by that for a second, but after I dug into that, I realized that this young man had different needs and different ideas about what the job is and what the work environment is. And it was foreign to me at the time, but it was my first millennial lieutenant that I was working with. So that was an eye-opener. That kind of started that. That changed even more as a small business owner, working with companies that are owned by millennials, trying to retain millennial employees. That was definitely an eye-opener. And then working in the corporate world, one of my jobs when I was with Target Corporation is, as an experienced manager, I got to mentor new managers that had just come out of college, and they were millennials. And their views of the workplace were quite a bit different than what I had seen. Over that time, I started to teach classes at UCCS, and I got hired on full-time as an instructor. Now I teach them and I see them all day long. So I've had a good exposure on this. I've seen a lot of interesting things. I've researched with companies and organizations on what works and what doesn't work. And so that's kind of what we're doing today. That's my background, and that's where we'll go on this. All right. So our learning objective is simple. Your organizations right now are dealing with 3 to 4 workplace generations. If you want to stay competitive, you've got to be able to create a culture and a way of doing business that welcomes everyone, takes into account the special skills and abilities they all bring. But right now, you got to figure out how to manage that group of millennials and what's going on in there. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is that. So my goal in this is, yeah, there's some academic research here. There's some college kind of stuff here, but my goal is always to give leaders, organization leaders, business leaders, real world tools that you're going to be able to take to the job and use right away. So that's where we're coming from on this. Now this discussion today, I am up here talking to you, but I expect us to kind of dialogue and talk about things. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone, and we'll make sure that this is interactive and we're all on the same page. All right. So what challenges right now are you having in attracting millennial employees to your industry or your organization? What are some things that you're facing right now? Question over here, so we'll pass it. Okay.
We've found, particularly on the sales side of our business, that people are afraid of the word commission.
Okay. So commission's a little scary because, yeah, what if you don't sell anything? You may not make money. So that's something that we've seen. Those industries might be a little more challenging to those folks, and they might be staying away from them. Question.
Definitely a starting salary is a lot of sticker shock.
Okay. In terms of not making what they thought they were going to make?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's, that's interesting too. A lot of times, yeah, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to make $65,000 a year. It's like, no, you're not. I don't make that in some cases. So there might be a reality check in that area. So when they see what they need to do to work for maybe $35,000 a year, that might scare them off. So that could be a challenge too. Yeah.
Being a nonprofit, we don't have a glitzy downtown modern office that has free soda all the time, or so stuff like that. The offices downtown do have. So if that's our competition, then.
Mm-hmm. That can be a real challenge too, absolutely, because that's a hard knock life in some cases. And we talk about that with our students a lot of times in nonprofits. Are they not concerned about money? It's like, no, that's all they ever talk about is money. So it is a factor. Yeah. So that's something to think about. Any other challenges? Yeah.
This is sort of a tag onto that. So what I think I've seen, and certainly I see this with my daughter and her wife and her friends, is that if the meaningful work isn't there to make up for the lack in pay or the lack of the soda machines or bringing your dog to work, or in some places they actually have alcohol on tap. I know there are a few places that do that. Yep. Yeah, right. Then they're not. They would rather work at Starbucks or whatever, which is actually not a bad place to work. I don't want to denigrate that. But they would rather take something that my generation might think is, well, you went to college. Why would you do that? So I think they're looking at more factors again than just what we might have looked at. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is I think with their friends, they're just as likely to end up living at home. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen some research that supports that fact, that more of this generation still lives at home with their parents than in any prior time in history in the States. Yep. And because our generation tended to be wealthier and more affluent and did make a way, we don't mind that our kids still live
Right.
with us.
They can stay on your health care till they're 26 now
That's
or something
right. That
too. So
too.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
things have changed. The world's changed. That's more of a norm to be. My basement's full. I know what that's like. Yeah. So we have those issues. So those are good observations. Those are things that we're challenged with right now. It sounds like in this industry, it's something that we're really looking at. So that's good. We're going to have some great discussions on this, and hopefully this is going to hit. All right. So this is something I saw recently is a big factor in determining where millennials are going to work is where they want to live. And this is what we're seeing. And the move right now is definitely towards urbanization. And I was talking before the session about this morning about the city of Denver and how Denver has changed. And I grew up in the Denver metro area. I grew up in Aurora. And the thing that shocked me, I moved away for a long time and came back, is how the neighborhoods have changed. And people have moved into urban settings, and neighborhoods that were bad neighborhoods are now good neighborhoods. And it takes you back for a second. So some industries have taken advantage of that, and they've, urban areas, people want to live close to where things are. They want to be able to walk, bike, and take their dogs just about anywhere. So that's the idea. So we're seeing on here, millennials choose the perfect city, and almost 20% had New York on there. And New York has gone through big changes in terms of neighborhoods, and not just in Manhattan, but Brooklyn is the new Manhattan, and people live in Brooklyn, and bad neighborhoods in Brooklyn are now great neighborhoods, and you pay Manhattan prices to live in Brooklyn. And so that's changed. And the neighborhoods are revolved around cultural scenes, music scenes, art scenes, and they kind of pop up, and then infrastructure catches up. And we're seeing a lot of that in Denver. So New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles. Where's Denver on there? 2.4%. Okay, so not real high. So they may not be here in some cases. Colorado Springs, where I come from, we're not even showing on the list. Just to kind of, the idea in Colorado Springs, you see those bumper stickers around, they'll say, keep Boulder weird or keep Manitou weird. We have a bumper sticker in Colorado Springs that says, keep Colorado Springs lame. You see those around. So that might be chasing some of the folks off. So, but there's a lame, cool battle going on, but that's what we're up against. So if your industry, and in some of the industry, in this industry, you've got people in smaller towns, Western Slope, they may not be there. And you've got other generations retiring, and you need people, and they may not want to live where that's at. So that's a challenge. And even bigger cities we see, Orlando, Florida, you figure that would be all right. Philadelphia is way down there, but there's a big centralization around these cities. And 10 years ago, it didn't look like this. And now it's looking like that. Question here, let's get the mic over there.
Probably an obvious observation, but a lot of those up there are at the top are where the tech jobs are.
Yes, absolutely. And that's we're going to get right into that in a second. So that's a great segue is industries. Any other questions on that before I? So that's the other thing. So it is unevenly distributed, but it's not just by region, and by industry is driven a lot of that. So we're seeing big differences in what the demographic picture looks like regionally in these places. So Silicon Valley, the average age of employee is under 30. We don't see that in other industries. In some industries, the average age is quite a bit. So we talk about the federal government, jobs in the federal government, which used to be considered great jobs. I mean, a lot of us would like to have worked in the GS system. Why would that be a good job from maybe other workplace generations? Federal government, why is that a good job? Pension, okay, in some cases there's pensions, so there's some benefits there. What else? Stability, security, yeah, because usually those jobs, you hear about people that work in them forever. I know when I was in the military, we had civil servants that worked 30, 40 years in the system, retired with nice fat pensions, they had good benefits, they were treated well, absolutely, but that's not become a great job. Only 11% of the workforce population are millennials. 4 out of 5 are over 35, and they are retiring, and this industry is struggling to attract millennials. It's not something where people want to go. What do they see as a negative about a job like the federal government? Besides, you can't bring your dog to work. Yeah. What was it in there? It said, too many rules. Okay, there are a lot of rules in those jobs. Some rules in terms of maybe dress codes and that very, very hierarchical structured. But on the other hand, there's just there's standards of conduct that maybe they're not used to. That could be an issue. Question?
Kind of a negative feeling about.
Okay. So and the point on that was that maybe there's a negative feeling about the government, and that's something we'll talk about here and too, is distrust of large organizations. And we think about Congress. I think it's got the lowest rating of approval it's ever had, and we've got a lot of things going on, and there is a distrust of government. A really nasty election we just went through. A lot of things going on. So maybe the idea of meaningful work is not to be found in the federal government. There's a lot of paper pushing. Maybe their parents worked in the federal government. It didn't sound too exciting. When they came home, what did you do today? I filed this report. I did these things. It might be something that's drawn there. So some industries are really getting hit by this, and that's driving the population to those centers. And if you're not in one of those centers and you've got some workforce needs, you got some challenges ahead, but we're going to try to help you out with some tools going forward on that. So that's the distribution. All right. The other factor is once I find one, I can't keep them. We saw earlier 91% of them are leaving within 3 years. And the big issue is they leave because they can. Right now, we've got lowest unemployment we've seen in 8-9 years, and real unemployment, not just people who stopped looking for work, but they actually can find jobs. And they might be underemployed. They might leave a job to go work at Starbucks like we just talked about, but they are working and they can find it. So if they can leave, they will leave, is what I found. So it's incumbent upon us as organization leaders to try to create a culture that's going to keep our teams in place and do a good job in developing them and keeping them. So that's a challenge right now. Who's lost a Millennial employee in the last year? Had somebody just leave? A few you have? Okay. Yep. Somebody's leaving right now. Maybe they just left. You didn't know while you were here. Something along that happened. So that's something we're dealing with right now, and this is going to become more of an issue as time goes on. Yep. Question over here.
I mean, is there sort of like a cultural thing with that age group too? Like even me, my dad worked at Harley Davidson for 33 years.
Yep.
I knew I would never work for one company. Well, I got into radio, so I'm never going to work for one company for 3 years. But you know what I mean? So is there a sort of like expectation that it would be so boring to be at the same place for 30 years?
What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah. I mean, it might have been great to work for Harley Davidson for 33 years, and that was expected. But culturally, the expectation is you are going to leave, and their friends are leaving, and they've gone to different places, and they're all connected. So they know that. So yeah, it's a norm now, and it is. If you go back 1 or 2 workplace generations, and maybe radio has driven that. I mean, you move a lot, you do those things, but you're still in the same industry. So it's just the reality of it. Yep.
Kind of a chicken or egg thing, though? Is it the people are leaving the companies, or the companies aren't adapting? That's
a good point, and that's kind of why we're here. Yeah. So I think the answer to that is they are leaving more than the other workplace generations, but the companies and the organizations can do things to bring that number down, because they still will leave because they can. That opportunity is there. But we can do things to help that. And if companies haven't recognized the issue, they haven't done the things that develop those employees, they are going to go. So there is a lot we can do to help this situation out. I think that's definitely the issue. So this is something we're dealing with right now. If you're not in the right industry or in the desired area of the country, you might be struggling. But there is some hope here. 6 in 10 millennials say they are looking for new employment opportunities, which is shocking. Hopefully it's not one of your 6 while you're here today. But there is hope in that area. You may not have the area or maybe the industry initially, but some people get in those industries and they realize they don't like them. They realize it's not a good fit for them. And culturally, things that you can do with your organization to drive an environment that promotes meaningful work, recognizes teams, develops people, you might be able to attract people that you wouldn't normally be able to do by just doing things internally. So that's the challenge we're looking at right now. That was just that was just last month. I saw that in a Gallup poll that 6 of 10 were looking to do that. And when they're saying they're looking to do it, they're actually looking pretty hard at this point. There's a lot of research in those decisions. All right. So what are some things that we can do within our organizations to help attract millennial employees? One of the first things we hear a lot about is schedules and adjustment to schedules, more flexible work time. There's good things and there are bad things about that. Some people got a really bad taste in their mouth about flexible schedules, pajama jobs, things like that. There's a lot of industries you can't do that in, and it's gotten a bad rap, but adjustments of schedules can actually have a positive impact. Is anybody doing that in their organization? How's that working?
I think it's made a big difference. We sort of done away with the traditional work hour clock.
Okay.
And have gone to a more production-oriented accountability system.
All right.
As long as you get it done, we encourage people to spend time with their kids or go to their kids' ball game in the afternoon if they're playing. And I think that most people really appreciate it, I think.
So, and we'll pass the mic on to the next one, but I'm going to restate what you did right there. So the idea is that this organization has kind of gotten away from the schedule altogether. It's based on production. If you get done what you need to get done, then they can go do the things they want to do. If that means going to a Little League ball game, doctor's appointment, things like that, that's okay. That's a norm. A lot of us weren't raised in that kind of environment, were they, in terms of schedule? Did you want to talk about your schedule real quick? Same place. Okay, good. So that's the idea. So, but there's some industries we can't do that. But if we can look at schedules. So the idea, although it can be an unpopular adjustment, I think it's always something to look at, even if it's 30 minutes or an hour here or there, providing things can get done. And if you were raised in an environment where clock in, clock out, this is how we do things. When you get asked that question, your initial reaction is going to be, oh no, because the work's not going to get done. If you're not here, I'm not seeing you do that. It might not be an issue, but we saw earlier today, and I'll reiterate that, is we found the millennial, one of the surveys said millennial employees get inspiration being at home versus the other workplace generations got inspiration being at work. So in some cases, you might get a better deal out of that if you can do that. So adjusting a schedule, I think, is a pretty easy way to do that. But like I said, in some people's lives, a half hour can mean a lot. A single parent getting kids to daycare, 30 minutes starting at 8 instead of 7:30 can be just the whole world of difference. And you think someone would leave a job for that if they could get that 30 minutes? Absolutely. So those decisions, I think, need to be made individually. It helps if you have a mature team that's really built around and dedicated, because if they're not producing, that can be an issue. I was talking to a nonprofit about 2 years ago about an issue they were having. They were having a lot of people working at home, and it was okay, but they were maintaining an office for them at their company. And they were like, they were running out of office space. And so they were like, what are we going to do? And I said, why don't you just, set up a little area for visiting people when they come in, but you can't maintain an office. And the people working at home didn't like that. But that's something you got to give in that situation, is you may not have an office at home and an office at work. That's a luxury most people can't afford. So, but I think it's okay to set aside maybe a group of cubicles that people can come in and work and do things when they have meetings. So there are some reasonable workarounds for this. It doesn't mean everybody's at home in their pajamas working at home. Those have turned out to be not real productive. Pajama jobs I would maybe recommend staying away from, but adjustments to a work schedule, absolutely, and make that an individual decision based on needs and what you can get out of them. So 63% of surveyed U.S. workers, and that includes all workplace generations, are saying workplace schedules, especially the concept of 9 to 5. And I've never had a job where I got to come in at 9, but we use that term, but it's outdated and it's outmoded. And with the connectivity we have and people checking their emails at 3 in the morning and things like that, absolutely, we might want to look at that. But there's still a lot of leaders that are hanging on to that and don't want to let that go. And that's something that's a real challenge. Was it a difficult adjustment initially when you did it, or is it?
Well, there's a couple
Go ahead.
reasons that And a couple of reasons I decided to do it was, well, my wife and I always have been in the same industry and always worked at different companies until now. And she had a sales job where they had to drive back to the office and report in at the end of the day every day.
Ooh, okay.
And that was a gigantic inconvenience for me and the kids and everything else. And I thought, if this is this bad, you know, on my situation, I wonder what my employees are thinking if we're so rigid on things, and how much discomfort is it causing their employees when it's really silly.
Yep.
If you think about it, there's no need. I mean, we have email, everybody carries a cell phone,
Right.
and I just personally decided that the last thing I wanted to do was babysit people in terms of where they are. I'd rather babysit them in terms of, are they getting their jobs done? And if they're not, then we can have a conversation to try to find a plan to get them back on course. And that may involve more time in the office, but it really is inconvenient for parents, and most people have two working parents if there are two parents in the home, and then if not, you've got single parents, and that's a real burden on them and their kids.
Okay. So good, yeah, absolutely. I think good points. We got dual parents working. You got people living in different parts of town, working in different parts of town. There's a lot of pressures, and just a simple adjustment of work schedule can really make a difference. We've got to break that mold a lot of times in our thinking as leaders in being willing to do that. And I think a caveat that is, one, you got to make sure people are mature enough to handle that process. That can go through the hiring issue. In some organizations, you got to earn that. I've seen where it's like, after you've been here for year, 2 years, you've proven yourself. Okay, we're going to let you flex. What would you like to do? What can we do in that environment? Not everybody may be ready for it, regardless of what workplace generation you're in. But that's something you definitely want to look at. So schedule an easy thing to adjust. And these are some of the reasons we talked about why 50% are checking things out of work. We were all checking our emails and we were eating lunch there. That's kind of a given, how we do things. And they kept sending them too, didn't they? While we were out. They knew we were gone. 24% check and respond to work emails while participating in activities with family and or friends. That means you're out to dinner, you're at a birthday party, something like that. You get an email or text, you respond. Everybody guilty of that in the house? Okay. Yep. We all admit to that. And 62% say they choose to do this, not have to. And I think that's a good indication of the work ethic of folks across the workplace generations. We want to do that. Why? Why do we want to do that? Why would we want to do that? What do you think? Mike's coming around there, right there. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that depends on like what your job is. I'm the general manager, so the thing could be on fire or off the air. The tower got hit by lightning. I mean, it could be a million different things. So
that's an expectation of the job you wouldn't even think about. It's a done deal.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Yep. What else? What another reason why we might want to do it?
For me, I have my own personal standards.
Okay.
That I just feel like people expect me to respond because I've always responded before, and that if I step away from my usual procedure or way I do things, then they're going to think, oh, what's wrong? Yep. She's not responding when she normally does.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's almost like my own
They're going to
personal.
send a search party out at that point.
Yeah,
okay.
It's like my own personal standards of what I put on myself, which I think sometimes we as individuals can put our own expectations, structures.
Even if someone doesn't tell you to do it, you're choosing to do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
that's
it's still
a good
kind
point.
of a choice.
Absolutely. Someone else have? Yep.
I think it's a result of this, and you just.
Oh yeah, the technology.
It's just the technology, and we
okay.
become this instantaneous society, and you used to wait and check your email in the morning when you got to work because you didn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
Yeah.
So I think it's
first thing you get up in the morning, alarm clock rings.
And it becomes
out,
it's almost an addiction.
Just
that constantly
natural
responding.
response. Has anybody gone, or go ahead.
Oh, for me too. I mean, I literally get about 200 emails a day. If I stop checking for a day, now I have 400.
Yeah.
If I stop checking for 2 days. I mean,
It's
seriously.
a survival mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good. Anybody like were you going on a trip somewhere, you just flip it off? I know Shauna did, right? Did you do that in your honeymoon? Yeah, just turned it off. Yeah, that was tough, I bet. Did you have withdrawal symptoms or anything? No, okay. No, okay. It was good.
600 when I came back.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of how that works. So there's some good, I think there's some good news here. I think it builds on the case that you can adjust schedules. Just be reasonable about it and don't overdo it. A lot of the bad stories we've heard about this is when people have just let it go and they didn't manage it. So you need to be able to check that people are doing what they need to do, and I think it should be something somebody earns too. It should be a plus that you know you've done the right things. You get to do that. All right. So does it mean less work losing the 9-to-5 schedule? A lot of managers might think it does, but in reality, there's a lot of studies that show that the work is even more productive in some cases. Some people get going about 10 o'clock at night. Kids are in bed and the creative juices are flowing. I'm out cold at that time. I was conditioned to get up early too many years in the military, but a lot of folks, that's when they're hitting their groove and they see it and they can run off 3-4 hours of sleep or maybe they get a nap room where they can do that at work or something like that. That's there. So you can get better work. People got to know themselves. Now, the one thing is we have seen is millennials will be the first to ask about schedule adjustments. Don't be shocked. Don't be upset. It's going to happen. And I got a note here to tell this student story. This is a true story. It happened at UCCS with one of our students, and they were interviewing at USAA, big insurance company. And the story goes, they were talking to the prospective employee, and the manager said, this is a normal workday kind of looks like this. And they had, they were going to be supervising like a call center where people are handling inbound calls for insurance. Day starts 8. They take a break, 15 minutes here, and then there's half hour for lunch, another 15, and then you're done at 4. And the prospective employee says, hey, well, can I just take my 15 minutes and half hour together, and I'll just take that at the end of the day, and I can leave at 3 instead of 4. That really happened, and of course we were horrified when we heard about it, because that's not maybe the step you want to see. But there is some logic in that thinking there. It's not going to work in that environment, and that's something we try to talk. I know I try to talk to students about that. There's a place you can do that, and there's a place you can't. In some production environments, customer service areas, that you got to do it at that time, but they will ask a question like that. No, they were done in that interview at that point. It's all over. Okay, great job, great company, done for. And the after interview discussions like, you shouldn't have done that. Well, why? It's like, they think you're a slacker, you're a loser. Don't ever go there again. Okay. So, but we want to be careful that I think that the question is legitimate. Don't be taken aback by it, but it is out there, and that did happen. So we see a lot of interesting interview questions. Mike's coming right here.
I'm curious about how the prospective employee took that. Were they like, well, forget that company, I don't want to work there then if this is not an opportunity? Do you know what I mean?
I don't know if we got to that point. It was just like, well, why is it a bad question? And we tried to explain it, just didn't get it. It's like, well, it's still an hour. We had to say, well, yeah, but you have people that are going to be on the phones doing this. You're in charge of that. But I didn't get that. But that might be something that they say, well, if I don't have that adjustment, maybe I don't want to work there. It's probably something to find out ahead of the interview before asking that in the interview. We've seen a lot of interviews go sour by the post-question era there. That's not a question to ask. So one to kind of stay away from. Okay, so Deloitte's done a lot of surveys on this, and we found that training and training resources, whether it's formalized training that you send somebody away and you spend a lot of money on, or it's an hour a week on a Friday where somebody researches something and even maybe not even getting trained, but they actually train others. Hey, I just found this. Really, really makes a difference in terms of development. Earlier today, in the first session, we talked about informal feedback being as valuable as formal feedback to this workplace generation. It's the same thing in terms of training. I'm developing. I see the value in this. In 30 minutes, learning about patient care or learning about how to deal with customers and experience we had. And that's something we can do as leaders, as organization leaders, easily in keeping folks around. So training is critical. 2/3 of millennials expect to leave their job by 2020. They're saying that, but 70% say it's due to no or very limited leadership development training opportunities. So we're redefining what leadership is, and within our organizations, especially small businesses, we have control over that process. Again, it may not be formal, but it can still be really, really beneficial, and it can develop, and it can be cutting edge. And with the amount of information out there, training videos that are at your fingertips, even on YouTube, we've seen some pretty cool stuff on that. It can be done, so don't be scared by training. We think a lot of times as training as being a formalized, documented thing. It doesn't have to be. It could be something really simple and beneficial. Another thing we've seen a lot in the surveys is this idea of sense of purpose. What are we about? What is our mission? What are we doing? We get asked in the Air Force a lot, what's our mission, and there was this long mission, fly, fight, win, dominate the skies. And I had one, there was one general officer I worked for, and he says, no, that's not our mission. Our mission is to kill people and break their stuff. That's what he told us. But that was something everybody remembered. But it was something we could all get our arms around is that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. So the idea of a sense of purpose where I feel that something I do actually benefits someone, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to plug into. But a lot of times companies haven't thought about this, or organizations haven't thought about what their sense of purpose is in a long time. Mission statements, vision statements may have been on the wall for 5, 6, 7 years. It's something that has just kind of been forgotten. And we get anytime I've been to organizations and say, hey, we're going to redo our vision statement, it's like, oh, that means we're going to be locked in a room for 5, 6 hours. Everybody's going to fight and yell and scream and moan and groan, and they're going to and we're going to come out with something, and then we're going to put it on the wall. And we're going to forget about it. That's something that we found that the millennial workplace generation really, really looks at. It's something that somebody might post and say, hey, I work for this organization, and they say they do this. They're doing this, and I'm part of that right now. So I have a sense of purpose, but my company or my organization has to recognize they have a sense of purpose. So that's the idea in whatever the organization does, whatever they're about. So we got to learn from this and step back and look at what our sense of purpose is for the organization. We can get bogged down in the day-to-day stuff of what's going on, whether it's I'm teaching classes, you're working in your industries, and to take a step back and look at what you're doing, what it's all about. Every business that started, we hear a lot in small businesses, we're doing this to help customers get to this point. We want to solve problems, we're providing solutions. But over time, that stuff gets forgotten. And this new workplace generation has given us the opportunity to see this and energize that and be out in front on this. So they say millennial employees, they're going to thrive in environments where work has clear purpose for organization and society. That's not easy to do a lot of times. Hey, if you get this report done, the world's going to be a better place. It may not be that, but there are times when we need to step back and explain why is this important. I really got challenged by this when I was working, on ground floor distribution operations for Target Corporation. I got crusty old warehouse workers shagging boxes for 12 hours. We're doing 12-hour shifts on the weekend. How does this benefit Target? How does this benefit you? And I had no idea how to explain that to somebody who's been shagging boxes for 20 years. And the explanation, kind of came down to, well, if we hit our goal today of moving X amount of boxes, these products are going to get to the store, they're going to get sold, and then your 401k, which is based on our stock, is gonna go up, and you got to try and remind that every day. And sometimes it didn't work real well. I could tell that's not an easy environment to do that. But there is a sense of purpose. There has to be in each job. After a while, you may just go through the motions, but it is a challenge to leadership to be able to do that. So they're going to thrive in that environment, and they're probably going to stay longer too. So that's something we want to look at. We got to point it out, maybe not just to them, but maybe us ourselves, because we've forgotten this over the years. It's something to look at again. You got in this industry for a reason. You got into radio for a reason, right? Keep that flame going, and these folks can really, really help you find it again. So I think that's a big plus in doing that and attracting them and plugging into their energy. All right. Another factor that we talked about in jobs are perks, things that people look for. These may cost a lot. They may not cost anything. And I got this picture up here. I got this. One of and I got back to trucking again, being a supply chain guy. I think about this. So the truck industry was last summer. I was driving across. I was coming from North Carolina back to Colorado, and I was in Arkansas. And there's all these posters for attracting trucks, and I'm looking through them. They're talking about pay, benefits, and I see one, and you can bring your dog. So there's an issue. Here's a job you can bring a dog in. So a perk like this can be important. I have a challenge with animals at work. That's something it's really foreign to me. We have issue that with students that they may have a stressed dog or cat. We had one. There was one faculty member told a story about the guy brought a pig in. That's where he drew the line. It's like, there are no stressed pigs. Get that out of here. It was that nice little pig, but it wasn't going to work. So that's something I've got to deal with. But the idea of having things like nap rooms don't cost a lot. You can set aside a room in dark. Has anybody been in a place that has a nap room? Maybe you didn't know it was a nap room, but it was one. Okay, so it can be a plus. People can recharge 15. If they were sending emails at 3 in the morning, is it okay if they take 15 minutes of shutdown? I think that's okay for the most part. Again, there's the free food. Oh my goodness, is that a factor? If you have free food, maybe not all the time, but occasionally, it doesn't even have to be good food. It's just if it's free, that's a good thing. So free food is definitely a plus. May not be feasible for a lot of companies, but that's there. And then the pet friendly, and that's my response on the UGG, because I like dogs, but I mean, they don't have to be in restaurants and stores all the time. But I'm having to get used to it. And we have more dog parks than kids parks now, I think. That's something we're dealing with. So the perks are good, and they can be really expensive. And we heard about about spent itself into the ground on some of the perks they had with nap rooms. And the new CEO came in and said, that's it, this is over. And they shut a lot of this stuff off. The perks are good, but what we're really looking for as employees across workplace generations is a family type environment and a tight-knit culture. That's what's being looked for. And it can be delivered or enhanced through those perks. The perks won't sell it alone, but it's something that's positive. If you have a nap room and you make comments about everybody that goes in there, it's probably not going to be a good thing. But if it's looked at as positively, make sure the dogs have shots before they come in. I don't know. There's things you can do, but if that builds a family environment, I'll let the dogs in. But that's a challenge a lot. Anybody have places where they let dogs in? Work? Okay. We're seeing just more and more of that. I still struggle with that in restaurants. So look for these things. Again, they don't have to be expensive. They can be, but it's something that may set an organization apart from another. All right. So big issue right now is to stay competitive, you've got to get in this market right away before it changes too much. Typical millennial job candidate gets 13% more job offers than Gen X or boomers. Why is that? What do you think why is that? They're looking more. That's one thing. So they are looking more. We're not looking as much, in some industries. So they are looking, and the opportunities are there. That's quite a bit. So they're looking more. What else might be an advantage for them? They're cheaper. They work for less. Yep, absolutely. And then the other things that we've talked about earlier about being easier to train, a blank slate, they don't have bad habits that we see in some other workplace generations. They're not, it's a fresh, exciting look at the workplace. So these are all factors that we can look at that we need to do. Did that jump on me? No, there we go. Okay, so the next one says ramp up your onboarding and vetting process. All right, so been looking a lot. I've been looking a lot last few weeks on onboarding and what's going on with that. Most companies, organizations, onboarding involves what? What usually do you get in an onboarding process on a job? What kind of stuff do you see? What do you think?
Usually getting your email access.
Okay.
Getting your badges to get into doors.
Okay, so the typical personnel gotta do's. Okay, so those have to happen. What about company stuff, company culture, things like that? Maybe a video on the history of the company, what's involved. And what we found, especially with the millennial workplace generation, most of the stuff that's being put out in onboarding, they already know. They've already researched. They know all that, and they know all the bad stuff too, that they've went out on Glassdoor and they've looked at the reviews of the organizations. So they're out in front on this. And in fact, one survey said that before onboarding has actually started, they walk in the door, 60% of the hires have already decided they're going to leave within a year. So we haven't even onboarded yet. So we need to really, really take a look at our onboarding process and our vetting process for getting people in. What could you look at in somebody's background, and maybe it's a fairly new worker, that would show there's somebody that's going to hang around? What in their background might tell us that this is somebody who's going to hang in there? What do you think? What's that? Yeah, okay, so their hobbies and maybe how they align with work. So some hobbies really, really take a lot of dedication, like they're marathon runners or something like that. There's some dedication. Not everybody's a marathon runner. I'm definitely not. But things like that. If they were, I heard one company say, if they were like an Eagle Scout, they really had to hang in there and do that. That's something, yep.
So I just hired someone, and the first thing that I did after getting the resume was went to his LinkedIn.
There you go.
And
okay.
I really read everything on there. I read
Okay.
all of his reviews, all of his recommendations. I looked at the things he liked.
Okay.
We went to his Facebook page.
Okay. Companies do that.
Yeah, and so I really was looking for not just his own opinion about himself, but other people's opinions about him, and that was very helpful. And also seeing how many years of social media presence that he had, that was important to me. I'm a early adopter myself, so I wanted to see how long has he been on here.
Right.
Because that shows
there's a footprint there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a good point. And that's something we definitely counsel our students at. Our company's going to look at your social media footprint. Yes, they are, and many of them need to clean up their social media footprint. We tell them there's a lot of stuff out there. Question back there.
Look for location, or if they have roots in your area.
Roots in the area. That's good, because that's a sign. If there's an extended family in the area, they're probably going to be more apt to hang around. So those are good. Those are really savvy answers. I didn't get that a lot from some of our businesses we've looked at. They hadn't looked at that kind of stuff. So that's good. Those are things that are going to tell us that we may not see normally through a regular onboarding or human resource hiring process. We're going to miss those things. And they wouldn't show up on a resume. We got to dig in there and find out what's going on. So that's a factor. I know when I was with Target, we had one of our floor managers. They found out he was looking for a job. They called him in. They're like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "You guys are looking at?" They're like, "Yeah, you bet we are. We have big plans for you." Well, he didn't know that. So, but that can happen too. So you don't have to stop looking after they're hired. You might feel a little creepy about it, but I mean, it's out there. Okay, that's good. All right. So yeah. Junior associate for sales. Yeah, I saw before. Okay, so those are out there. So use that. The idea of social media absolutely as a tool for vetting, but there's things you can find out about people that will tell you that aren't in the traditional areas. So say background checks, testing may need to be looked at before it is too late in that case, before you hire them. Background checks, and whose company drug tests? Anybody doing that in here? Okay, not so much. In some industries, absolutely. We talk to, it's a given, others aren't. That's always a scary question if they ask during an interview, you guys don't drug test here, do you? If they ask that, that's a challenge. So yeah, so those are things to think about. Testing, does anybody use testing in their jobs for determining either personality tests, intelligence tests? Those are great vetting tools, and that might eliminate some people that you're looking for. If you're using something like a Big Five personality indicator, is there a personality type that is more successful in your industry? And that may, you may look for that as part of the hiring process. They're going to be a better fit, and that can stop a lot of tough decisions in the end. And the other thing on here is, because they are looking, and because they can look, chances are you're not the only one at the dance here. There are other suitors for this employee, and they're digging in, and people are hiring. And will other companies poach your employees? Absolutely. You do the same thing. We got to stay competitive. We want to get the best people possible. So these things are definitely out there. Right. So definitely we want to do a good job on that. And this is within our normal purview of things, but just adding in the social media part. All right. Let's get back to this real quick. Okay, so we've talked a bit about motivation and attracting. I want to get into this concept of loyalty. And this is something I've learned about personally and seen some research on it. It's one of these words that means something different to the workplace generations. And we say loyalty, we'll say millennial employees are not loyal because they leave. They post bad things about us. Whatever happens to be, you'll see that in a lot of companies. There's blog spots that everybody dumps all their stuff in there. It's all internal company things. I saw that a lot in corporate. I had no idea that existed. That was a big issue. So they're disloyal. But what we found is this workplace generation is incredibly loyal to friends, coworkers, bosses, faculty. We'll see that. So this is something we've seen with this workplace generation is they give less to the school they graduated from than the other workplace generations. 5 years out, 10 years out. And it's because of, now, they may really, really like a faculty member. I've had students that they'll take multiple classes from me. There's some I want to get maybe restraining orders against because they're just around a lot. But that happens. So there's a lot of loyalty to individuals, but maybe not to the organization as a whole, not to good old UCCS or wherever you work. And in fact, I know when I left corporate and when I was leaving Target, a couple of my junior managers said, "I'm out of here if you're leaving." I'm like, wait a minute. This is a good job. You got great benefits. As if you're leaving, I am gone. I said, well, somebody's going to be in here, and it's like, they're out. I mean, just at that point. So maybe loyalty that's different, loyalty that can be very deep and personal, but not necessarily to the big organizations, that there can be a trust issue there. Have you seen that kind of thing? Is that something you're, okay. So so we have to, I think we have to recognize that that's there, and then also understand that we might need to direct that loyalty to the organization as a whole. There's distrust of institutions, organizations. We talk about political parties. A lot of millennials vote but don't belong to a political party. We found that there's millennials that bowl but don't bowl in leagues. There's things like that. Why is that? Where's that mistrust coming from with the bigger organizations? Why is that there? Yeah, so Enron, Great Recession, yep, absolutely. They grew up when a president got impeached, right? They saw that. A lot of things have happened in there. So there is and maybe they saw their parents get burned by big organizations. We see this a lot. There's a huge movement in the church community in trying to attract people to their churches, and they're going after millennials. And millennials there's this concept called church shopping. If you've heard of that, they can church shop for years and never join a church. Others may have been in the church for 4 or 5 years and haven't ever joined. They don't give either. That's another factor. So you're trying to, but there's still a lot of loyalty to the people that they know maybe in that church or the people they're bowling with. But as far as joining something, becoming a Republican or a Democrat, no way. I'm not going to do that. So we have to understand that going in, that don't look at that loyalty as being a complete negative. It actually there's loyalty there. It's just a little different. It's like the words we talked about before in competition, engagement. Loyalty is there. It's just a little different. You may find employees they can be incredibly loyal to you personally. You may not even know it. So it's something to be on the lookout for. If there is a distrust in big organizations, you'd expect them to maybe look to grab onto that. And so it's not that it's not there. It's just a little bit different. So what can we do to help out with that? Simple strategies that we can use as leaders to try to build loyalty. And one of the things that comes up a lot is this idea of transparency. I think of transparency as like a piece of plastic wrap that you wrap over a food product. You can see through it. That's the idea. And we've had every administration say they're going to be the most transparent than ever, and they're not. That's the issue. So there's distrust with that. So if we say we're transparent, we better be transparent. So what does that mean in that case? What would transparency and leadership mean to you as a leader, as an employee, if they're being transparent? Okay, we'll pass up, so go ahead.
You have to be able to show your mistakes, know when you're doing something wrong. It's that big idea of know what you know and know what you don't know.
Okay, so I think that's a huge point in terms of honesty, is if you've made a mistake, actually admit it. We don't get that a lot. People don't want to admit that they're wrong, and we're afraid to, I think, in a lot of cases, because we don't want to show weakness. And in reality, it actually shows strength when we admit we are weak and we need help, or we've made a mistake that we don't do, or we don't pretend like we do know. And that's something we've seen a lot also is if you give an assignment to an employee and they ask, well, how do I do this? And if you tell them, like, I don't know, I just need you to figure it out in some cases, and that's where it goes a lot. And that's huge in that case, because if you don't want to admit you don't know how to do it because you don't want to admit you don't know how to do it, the employee is going to think you just don't want to help them. And if you admit, it's like, hey, we've never done this before. I have no idea how to do this. This is why I'm picking you to do it. That shines a light there. And that's something, those small conversations can really, really help. Also builds a lot of loyalty in terms of transparency. So being honest, transparent, if you don't know, you don't know. If companies are going through tumultuous situations, we may not know anything about what's going on, but we can tell them what we do know on a regular basis. Here's what's going on with the merger. Here's what's going on with this law change, what we know right now. If we don't tell them, what do they think? You're hiding something. Yeah, exactly. So there's a natural distrust for that, and we can be the bridge as the leader who's talking to this team about what's going on. Share that and be transparent. Why questions come up more than ever with this workplace generation. You can see in the classes. Why are we doing this? What's going on? You try to explain a benefit. I was trained not to ask why questions in the military. That was like, if we want you to ask why, we'll tell you, you can ask why. But for the most part, you did it. A lot of times there was a very specific way to do that. Why questions are okay, we can't take that as being insubordinate. They really want to know why because they want to be engaged. They want it to be meaningful. They want this to be a good thing. So when new plans were to roll out, when new ideas were to roll out, try to anticipate the why questions. You might be able to handle a lot of them without getting it. And again, they are going to ask why more than any other workplace generation. One of our staff employees at UCCS, she's got this great system she uses. It's Rochelle that works there. Yeah, she's got this great system. And when she gives a task, she says, I will give you 5 questions on this. Use them carefully. It's like the genie rubbing the lamp. You get 3. You got 5 questions. And so she's forcing them to try to figure things out, but only to go to ask an important question. Otherwise, you're going to get a million questions because they don't know. But if I only, you got 5 questions, and when 5's up, that's it. She doesn't give them any more. So it's an easy way to do there. So, and the other line is, if you don't know, say so. And a lot of leaders don't. I know in a lot of cases as a leader, I didn't want to tell, why are we doing this? I have no idea why we're doing this. And that can be very honest. You say, you can say, I'm trying to figure that out too, but it's a gotta do. So we're going to do this. I'll try and find out some more information. I'll try and give you a good reason. But usually you can dig up some reason for that. But sometimes why questions actually lead to pluses. It leads to making things better. And we find out we've been doing things for a long time for no reason. We've just been doing it, and some of us have learned to do that, just get her done and not answer the why questions. So don't take the why questions as being insubordinate, but expect them and then anticipate them so it doesn't become as much of a distraction to get them. We talked a little bit about this earlier. I want to reiterate this again, is the idea of regular feedback. Employment evaluation systems can be incredibly taxing, and they can take a lot of time and effort. Feedback, regular feedback, informal feedback can be really, really positive. It's something that we can do very easily. It's something you can structure yourself to do as a leader. And we found that many boomers, Gen Xers, were not raised in feedback-rich environments. In fact, we used to call fight for feedback. We used to where you'd have to go to your supervisor and tell me how I'm doing. How am I doing? And they're like, maybe they don't even know. They're not sure what's going on. But the idea is we want to build a system where people can talk to each other, where feedback can go 360 degrees. Customers, subordinates, supervisors, and that a mechanism can be built where it's natural. And with these workplace generations, the Gen Xers, the boomers, and even the you can call the World War II generation, they're not around that at all. We have to train them how to give and receive feedback if they haven't done this before on a regular basis. Because if you get a group of millennials in, it's going to happen. They're used to doing it. It's natural to them, and it can be a positive thing. Use that freshness, that energy to get here. And that, no news is good. It says no news is not good news. Is the idea. We saw where the World War II generation under feedback, it says no news is good news, and that is not the case. If you're not getting feedback, that's a bad thing. We talk about being direct and highly specific. It's got to be timely. Feedback in a lot of cases if it's negative feedback, it's say you did this wrong the other day, and there's simple tools that you can use to try to disarm in a situation like that. Maybe somebody made an inappropriate comment in a meeting, or they did something that really wasn't, in adherence with the company values. And you can disarm in a lot of cases, but if you start out the conversation with, hey, remember last Tuesday's meeting on production? Okay, by doing that, you've put them in the same place. There's no defense at that point. And then even saying something as simple as, and during that meeting, you made a comment on this. Okay, you're all on the same page. And then you could say, when you made that comment, I felt like you weren't all in on this process. And it's disarming. It gets them on the right page. Everybody gets it. Without you did this wrong right away, and people are putting their shields up and defending. So that's the idea. So if you can do this, it's great. If you've got people working around the country, you can do this electronically. Electronic feedback is something that's really become more in. It's more natural with folks who've worked with technology. So if you can do that, great. And Gallup poll in 2016 said employee engagement was highest with employees who met with their boss at least once a week. Now, you may not want to meet with some of your bosses once a week, but we all said we want feedback. And if that becomes natural where you're scheduling that time in, especially with this new workplace generation, it can really mean a lot. And it can just be 20 minutes, 15 minutes about how's it going, what's going on. And then the regular feedback, you'll see that'll develop that loyalty you're looking for. Definitely a plus in that area. So there's things that we can do that are pretty simple in this. This idea of a collaborative work environment, and we use a lot of sports analogies in business, and we talk about this. So we got a collaborative work environment. We talked about the idea of having a huddle before the day starts. Some industries, this is done regularly. In production environments, we would have a startup, 10 to 15 minutes a day. Hey, here's what's going on today. Here's the production plan. Here's what I need you to do. Go get them. A lot of industries, you don't have that, and this becomes a challenge. But it's a great communication tool. It sets norms for how work is done and how the workplace is supposed to run. The idea that this workplace generation is slow in picking up verbal cues and nonverbals on how work is supposed to be done. Can I talk in this meeting? Well, they'll just talk in the meeting. And there's some meetings that you don't talk in. They don't know that. And by having regular huddles, that workplace culture gets shown on a regular basis. So that's a real plus in that area here. So in this situation, you got the Broncos in the huddle. Hopefully everybody knows what play is being called and what snap count is supposed to be, that kind of thing. And that's a good way to do that. There's a mission right now. We're going to run this play, and we're going to do this, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And it's collaborative because if they're going to run the ball or throw the ball, the offensive line has to know who to block. Receivers need to know where to go. It's something as simple as that. So that environment, the team culture is right around in there. It's natural in this environment. In some of your work areas, it may not be. You got to work at this if you're going to do that. And whether that's electronically, whether it's a telecon, something that just where people can check in and they're plugged into what's going on. If you've got people working at home, or maybe they don't make that meeting, you got to try to include them in there too. Don't exclude them. But that's what that collaborative work environment. And it looks like the score is 0-0 in that game. So, but they got a 3rd and 10. Hopefully they'll do better this year. That's what we're looking for. So that's the idea. All right. So collaborative work environment, what is it? And it's something we hear a lot from our millennial workers is they're looking for a collaborative work environment. I hear that from students. So what is it? And so we get this idea. Kelly Work Services had this definition. It says it's defined by a highly diversified team. That's nice to know. Working together inside and outside a company with the purpose of creating value by improving innovation, customer relationships, and efficiencies. Wow, that sounds tough. There's a lot of things there. But we see that concept of team. We see that concept of creating value. Every work organization, nonprofit, profit, whatever it happens to be, should create value for someone. And we may need to work to try and show where that value is on a regular basis. We're going to take a look at this video real quick, and I'm going to talk over this, how this is going on here. A lot of companies are selling collaborative work environments, and they're really expensive. So this one here, these are really expensive systems, tens of thousands of dollars. You got to open space, and they start putting the things in. Glass, there's transparency right there, isn't it, in terms of what's going on. They've got some pretty cool systems, dashboards where everybody can see, which is really nice to have. But you don't see this. Anybody's workplace look like this? No, okay. Be nice if it did. You can get this. It is something that's there. These can help. And if you can see the idea, we were talking about the importance of dashboards before, where people know what's going on with performance of the organization. This allows everybody to get on the same page. I think this stuff is great if you can afford it. However, the culture you provide and the leadership that you give is going to go a lot further than this. It's funny how that works in the idea of terms of dashboards. We actually, when I was doing distribution operations for Target, we ran for a time where they told us not to tell the employees how they were doing production-wise for the day. Yeah, it sounds nuts, right? That's what I thought, and it didn't work because they kept asking how we're doing, and they said, well, just concentrate on your work practices. Are you moving? Are you doing the things you're supposed to do? And they're like, we have no idea. We don't know how we're doing. So you do need to measure. That was a failure, that experiment was. So we're looking for that. And stay away from the fancy office designs. That stuff can bankrupt you, definitely. All right. Within the collaborative work environment, we found it's really, really a good thing if there is a common purpose and a goal. In the video, we saw the Broncos in the huddle. Their goal is to win games, or their goal is to run a successful play, get a first down. It's nice in that environment. You know exactly what your goals are. But if you have team members scattered, maybe at home, some of them working on different projects, on the football team, it's the coach's job to focus everybody on the common purpose. In that case, in football, it's pretty easy. You want to win a game. You want to do the right things. And if we do these things, we win. What's winning look like in your organization? What does a W look like? How does that actually look? And in some cases, that might be something you want to ask an employee. What does success look like in your job? Explain to me how you know you're doing well. And that in some cases, that might take some time to go through. So the goal of winning, whatever that is it a market share? Is it a listener rating? Is it a sales rate? Whatever that is, everybody needs to know what that focus is. And if that's on a dashboard or something that's communicated regularly, that'll help. So without a goal, there is no team. So some ideas for creating a common goal include, we talk about create and or review the team's charter. And this is getting into that mission, vision stuff again. So we did this, I think it was a year and a half ago. We revisited our mission and vision statement in the College of Business at UCCS. And so the first thing we did is we got all the faculty together, and of course, all the big heads in the room, everybody's knocking heads, trying to figure this stuff out. We did something different. We involved the students in the process. Why not, right? They're our main customer. If we have a stockholder, they're our stockholders, are our students. And boy, did they get into it. We had guys jumping up on desks, super passion that we didn't have. We were like, oh, here we go again. They infused us. They improved the process. They moved the ball in that situation. And you will find that with your millennial employees. In a lot of cases, even if they're not in management, they're key stockholders for your organization. Bring them into this. Think about how all out they are, or all in they are on meaningful work. This is where it shows. And your mission, your vision should be up front. It should define what you do. It should be about what you're doing every day. And what are we doing here? There it is. That's what we're all about. So create it. If you don't have one, we find, and this is something when we work with a lot of small businesses and setting up their business plan, if they're trying to get funding from private lenders, is they got to have a business plan. They got to have some sort of charter that says who they is, that says why they exist. Most of them don't. Most of them don't. They can't put that down and say, hey, you gotta explain why you exist. What value are you creating? What are you about? Because lenders actually look at that stuff. And then discuss, why does this team exist? And a discussion with students about why a college exists and what we're supposed to be producing was really an eye-opener for me. They brought up things I never would have thought about. So again, it really energized me, and these folks can really energize this process with you. Absolutely is a good thing. Use them, and it'll force you to kind of step away from what you've been doing over the years and get into that common person and a goal. Good thing to have in these is rules about that allows each team member to express commitment. So before you start one of these sessions, a lot of time it's a good idea to set out ground rules. Everybody's idea gets to be heard. They use a lot, respect each other. What does that mean? What are they looking for in terms of respect, and try and define that, explain what that's about. We see this a lot in organizations and some of the consulting groups that I've worked with over the years. They talk about that the culture of organization is actually communicated through things like mottos, symbols, awards, or posters. And if they've been on the wall more than 5 years, they probably need to go. It's time to move that on, but it should express what the organization is about. What are they trying to do? If it doesn't, get rid of it. If you like it, take it home or something, but it's time to move that stuff out of there. But we're looking for that, and they're expressions of cultures. Cultures express themselves through symbols. The bald eagle, the American flag, those are symbols that represent America. What symbols represent your organization? Is there something that tells what your culture is, what it's about? So these things should be there. And if you're doing this, this will naturally grow. I would not be good about making something to put on a wall or a phrase or a symbol, but I think I could help a team get there, kind of create that environment. So, and then we use the common purpose to prioritize team actions. I want to show a video here, and I'll set this up as this is coming up. This is a company called Tasty Catering. Let's watch this real quick. Tasty Catering is in the catering business in Chicago. Very highly competitive industry, if you can imagine. And we had their CEO come to UCCS and talk to us about what they were doing there. And the impressive thing about Tasty Catering was, as they're getting ready for this meeting, let you watch this.
Hello, Tasty. Hello, Radio. Welcome to our town. Today, special event.
Special events is going up to $80,000. We are currently at $72,000 as of this morning, and that does not include a event that Ellen has for $19,000 in just coffee sales.
1, 2, 3. Coffee supplies.
We are going to come down a little bit, going down to $2,300.
Way more effort. Give me 3 claps, please. 1, 2, 3. Employee expenses.
We're coming down to $1,200.
I think it's a great number. Give me a round of claps, and give me 3 claps, and 1 big hand. Yes? 1, 2, 3.
That was not what you called for.
All right, I've got a question here. Let's see if anybody can figure this out. How did this stay the same with sales growth and this stay the same? Is there an issue there? Tim, with logistics labor, 25,800 out of 325,000.
CST sales stayed the same.
Awesome, excellent answer.
T-shirt.
So just an update for set on our mini game where we're trying to give Tony clothes. He has, we've already done 3 out of 5 of our categories. Venue visits, we just need a few more, but our big push that our team is trying to do is hit those calls.
If there's one thing everybody can take away today, it's let's all focus on trying to do whatever we can to land more sales.
I see every week, I keep motivating themselves. You guys see the results now. We have better sales, and everybody's married today. So, keep doing it next week. We make good lunches for you guys. You guys good sales for us. Okay? And for everybody else, give me 3 claps and finish with a round of applause, please. 1, 2, 3.
All right, so we had the CEO from Tasty Catering actually come to UCCS, and he had been in the catering business for years, and dealing with the issues. Imagine high employee turnover. You think in that industry? Oh yeah, and he I guess he had a lot of issues with alcohol. Very stress-driven industry, and he went through a transformation. He actually changed to a completely transparent culture. All the indicators are shown. They really went all in on culture. And this is where we show the results really make a difference. He's actually doing, he does around the same amount of business as the top caterers in Chicago, but he does it with 1/3 of the staff. And it's because of this. Everybody's bought in on this. Everybody hangs around forever. And it's simple stuff. Some of it's silly with the claps and the woo, but everybody gets what's going on, and everybody sees what their part is in the bottom line. And so they really embrace the culture. They repeat their mission statement every day. He was really one of the most interesting speakers I've ever seen. not, he doesn't look like a guy in TED Talks or something. It was the brother of the guy who was at the board. He kind of looks like him, but a little older, kind of a scary looking guy actually, but incredible and just super passionate about an industry. So in this environment, it's made a difference by doing these things. So that common purpose and goal, in this case, they're making food. They're doing weddings and bar mitzvahs and everything else that you do there, and they're doing it better than everybody else because everybody's locked in on this common goal. So that's there. Trust was really big at Tasty Catering. They do a lot of exercises on trust, but the idea team members got to trust that they're going to work together successfully. Some things that work in this area, you got to be honest. They talk about working to eliminate conflicts of interest. We were talking about at lunch about teams. If they have team members that aren't participating, that they have to be courageous enough to challenge that team member. It's like, hey, I really need you to energize. And sometimes you need to train people to do that kind of thing. And they also give the idea, give team members the benefit of the doubt. That's an issue. Talk about communicating openly and effectively. Miscommunication can really, really damage teamwork and impact transparency. So that's a challenge there. So Tasty Catering definitely errs on the side of over communicating. They want to make sure all the information is given out. They want to look at all angles that are happening there. And if there is something that's misunderstood, get that information out there right away and fix it. Bad information can destroy an organization. And it's important to know what's being put out and if it's not right to fix it. We saw Tasty Catering was definitely a very diverse group there, all ages, ethnicities being represented in Chicago. We got to know team members are going to come from all walks of life. Diversity is it's a legal issue in some cases. We definitely want to make sure, but take advantage of the team diversity, and that means our workplace generations. If you have people, if you're lucky, if you have people from the World War II generation still working in your workplace, they have a tremendous amount they can share, and that needs to be used along with all the rest of the workplace generations. Reasonable people can get along if they differ. We don't see that in Congress or news media right now. What's going on sometimes in the world, but the reality is we can learn as much from each other as others. And the guys from Tasty Catering, the management there, they didn't think anybody could tell them anything about catering. They'd been doing it their whole lives. They took over the business from their fathers, and there was a way you bake cakes and make hot dogs and do all this stuff. That hasn't changed, but the team member commitment is the big thing. So by doing these things, it really helps. And this stuff goes without knowing or without talking a lot about it. I'll let you look at that. The one thing I really want is don't ignore diversity issues in organizations. A lot of people try to pretend like there's no differences. Yeah, there is. Ages, things like that. Acknowledge it. It's not a negative. It's a good thing. So that's something we definitely push amongst our folks. And in the end, we can balance our team's focus. This can help quite a bit. We saw it at Tasty Catering. They were monitoring just about everything that was going on there. And they use an old-fashioned whiteboards, about as low-tech as it gets. And they just write it in there so everybody sees what's going on. Team members that are definitely plugged into the process, they see they're part of it. They're going to celebrate those wins, and they're going to aggressively take on the challenges as they come up. I liked where they had their little mini celebrations, even something as simple as giving the t-shirt to the guy who explained it. And it was a good question. It's kind of like, well, why are these numbers the same? And he was able to explain it. Awesome. Boom, t-shirt. Everybody claps, does the woo. That's a good thing. A t-shirt is a relatively cheap item, but it's something that people hold with pride there. I like the organizations that are able to build both goals, that individual goals match up with organization goals. We were talking about that before, how your actual sales performance impacts the entire operation. Your bonuses depend on this. Your 401k depends on how effectively you do this. So that's something we want to look at there. Okay, so we're coming down the home stretch, just a couple minutes left. We've been here a long time today talking. Any aha moments in this session, something that jumped out at you that said, ooh, that's good. Something that you maybe recognize you want to share, or a question you may have too as we're wrapping for this afternoon.
I have a question, and I'm seriously not trying to play the Gen X tiny violin of what about us.
And, yeah.
But what sort of information, and maybe it's at the college or university level, do millennials get about how to work with the rest of us?
Good
you know
question.
What I'm saying?
That's a good question, and it's severely lacking, as we've seen in the workplace. So, something we have a class we actually put on Career Week that it's called Your Adjustment to the Workplace, and we talk about this stuff. Things like don't talk to the boss in the bathroom, or even things as subtle as that. When can you talk at meetings? 10 questions you should ask your boss. You're better off being formal than informal, because these social cues, nonverbals, they're not as good as picking up as some of the workplace generations, and some people think it's because of too much communicating like this. I don't know if that's true or not. There's not empirical evidence of that, but that's something people point to, that some of the soft skills are lacking. But it's not happening near as much as it should. And I think in some cases it's incumbent upon the work centers to recognize that they may be lacking in this area, and we need to do a little bit more. And we talked about setting boundaries for them, that there's areas that you can play in. There's areas I'm going to allow you to do things in, but to this line. And you have this amount of money. If you go outside of our function, I got to know. But within the function, you've got free will. You may not have had to do that with other workplace generations because they just got it. They understood that. This workplace generation might be lacking a little bit in there, and so we've got to do that. But we're working more on that at the university. And we actually had one of our OPED series. We actually had it for millennials, and we spent a few sessions with them talking about this stuff. It was real interesting getting their perspective on how things went, and right and wrong and things like that. So that's a good point there. Other questions? All right. Okay, good. Well, awesome then. I'll wrap up here real quick in conclusion. My goal was today was to talk to you about this stuff, but actually give you some real world tools to use. And I hope we did that today. That's what we're looking for. So first we talked about the idea of attracting millennial employees, and that we might be in industries or parts of the country that's going to be difficult in. We saw where a lot of that talent is focused in the big cities, in the tech areas. If we're in rural areas or in industries that aren't there, that haven't historically attracted them, good news is 6 in 10 are looking to change, so your industry might be who they're looking for. That's the plus there. We talked about loyalty a lot, that loyalty might mean different things, that we might misinterpret these employees as being disloyal when in fact they're very, very loyal personally to us or to individuals. And that's something we can use and build on in terms of loyalty, and we gave you some strategies to help out with that. And finally, we looked at keeping them, things that we can do. And we looked at some examples in terms of transparency, culture, mission, vision, and finally we looked at that video from Tasty Catering. Saying a real dog-eat-dog industry where most people aren't happy, and these guys are really, really happy. I thought that was really interesting. All right. Well, it's been a great group. I appreciate your questions and your interaction today, and I thank you from UCCS and OPED. Thanks.